Mid lane is the major focus for 12.19 as we have the Syndra mini rework hitting the Rift along with some pretty impactful buffs to Fizz and Echo. With the help of our challenger players and analyzing the most up-to-date stats, we are set to bring you guys a complete update on the solo queue tier list. But before we get into it, be sure to check out SkillCapped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. There are about as many skins set to drop this patch as there are balance changes, with 9 different champions receiving Spirit Blossom skins: Aphelios, Darius, Evelynn, Master Yi, Sett, Soraka, Syndra, Tristana, and Yorick. Prestige skin goes to Master Yi, which is actually pretty interesting considering Yi is being nerfed this patch. Usually Riot likes to buff champs when they have a new skin coming out, but they're pulling a 180 on us this time. We have just one item or rune change for 12.19, and it's going to be a much awaited nerf to Eclipse. Lethality will drop from 18 to 12, while the AD is going from 55 to 60. Less overall snowball power coming out of Eclipse in the early game, which will lead to a decrease in strength for some of the prominent meta picks like Aatrox, Zed, and Hecarim. This change should really help in diversifying lethality mythics and make it so that Eclipse isn't the most dominant any longer. For example, Zed's highest play rate mythic is Eclipse, but he can still build Duskblade or Prowlers, so instead of spamming Eclipse every game, you'll have to think a little more about your item selection. A ton of off-meta builds will be buffed for this patch, including AP Twitch, AP Tahm Kench, AP Rakan, AP Nunu, and AP Malphite. We'll be keeping a close eye on those builds as the patch moves forward, and be sure to update you guys if any of them actually end up being worthwhile to play for solo queue. Riot planned to buff Nasus in 12.18, but they pulled the changes last minute, so they're back penciled in to go live for 12.19. Our bonus Q range is going from 25 to 50. W attack speed slow is going from 50 to 75%. Our tick rate is being lowered from 1 to 0.5 seconds, however, the total damage will remain the same. So it looks like the cooldown buff to Nasus' ultimate has been scrapped that was originally planned for 12.18. These set of buffs don't look as promising for Nasus, and he's definitely not going to jump into a top tier position, but we will be giving him a bump from B into A tier. Udyr top was hit way harder than jungle as a result of the 12.18 nerfs, so Riot has a few top lane Udyr buffs planned to compensate. W minion healing is going from 50 to 60%. Our damage to minions will be increased from 40 scaling to 85% to 50 scaling to 80%. Q2 minimum damage to minions is going from 0 all the way to 80 scaling to 160. The big one here is definitely the Q buff, as it will make Q max way more viable for top lane Udyr. Now that Q2 will be dealing damage to minions, it will allow for Bruiser Udyr to push out waves so much better. That was really the main reason why you could only go R max on top lane Udyr before, since with Q max you had such terrible shove. As a result of these buffs, we will be moving Udyr back into A tier for 12.19. If we have a look at the complete top lane tier list, Shen and Darius will be locking down the OP tier spots. Eclipse being nerfed will put a dent in Aatrox's power level, but not to the degree where he'll be falling entirely out of meta, so a move from OP into S is what we see fit. No reason to drop Aatrox if you have been enjoying him or seeing good success. Singed is one top laner really being slept on right now after his buffs from a few patches back. Singed players who rush Demonic Embrace are currently winning over 56% of the time, which is absolutely insane. We covered this Even Shroud build for Singed in our recent Korean builds video that Lehens has been using, and it's definitely one you should be looking to try. Our top 3 low elo recommendations for top lane are Garen, Mordekaiser, and Yorick. Maokai, Aatrox, and Darius are the highest priority top lane bans. Watch out for Echo this patch, as his passive and ultimate will be receiving buffs. Passive AP ratio is going from 80 to 90%, which will make those late game Baron secures even easier now. Echo's passive damage to monsters is already completely insane, as you can deal over 2k damage to Baron with max build. Our damage is going up as well, from 150 scaling to 450 to 200 scaling to 500. Our AP ratio is up as well, from 150 to 175%. All in all, some really solid buffs for Echo that will be enough to propel him from our A tier up into S for 12.19. The next 2 jungle changes are going to be nerfs, and the first champion on the list is Master Yi. AD growth will be lowered from 2.5 to 2.2. E true damage AD ratio is going from 35 to 30% bonus AD. Not the end of the world by any means, but the nerfs are impactful enough to see Master Yi lose his OP tier standing. We'll be moving the Wuju Bladesman down 1 tier and into S. Despite her low play rate, Rek'Sai has had one of the highest jungle win rates in recent patches, so it's likely the reason to why Riot is nerfing her. Base AD is going from 64 to 61. We all like to meme about these base stat nerfs, but they are actually quite impactful, especially for someone like Rek'Sai who needs to be ahead early. If this were a scaling AD nerf, then it wouldn't be a huge deal, but losing flat AD for the early game will more heavily influence Rek'Sai's power level. We will be moving Rek'Sai from S down into A tier as a result of this nerf. For the jungle tier list, the OP champs have been constantly evolving as we have Fiddle and Bel'Veth for 12.19. Bel'Veth has been in a great spot for a while now, and with the likes of Hecarim, Kayn, Master Yi, and Udyr all nerfed in recent patches, she's able to move up in priority. Fiddle should not be slept on right now, as he's been our longest standing OP tier jungler, while so many other junglers have been nerfed in the meantime. Due to all the recent jungle nerfs, you gotta start paying attention to picks like Elise and Kha'Zix, who are creeping back up into powerful spots. The Maokai jungle is also extremely underplayed right now as a result of his buffs last patch, so if you want to add a tank to your jungle champion pool, we'd highly recommend the tree. Top 3 low elo junglers are Amumu, Master Yi, and Bel'Veth. Udyr, Fiddlesticks, and Bel'Veth are some of the best jungle bans for the patch. Moving on to the mid lane changes, let's start off by having a look at Fizz. E-AP ratio is going from 75 to 90%. A pretty hefty buff to Fizz's mid to late game power, but do keep in mind it's an AP ratio buff, so it's not going to be super impactful throughout the early game. A Rocket Belt Rush will benefit the most from this change due to Rocket Belt having 90 AP, while Luden's sits at 80. For Fizz's tier list placement, we will be moving him into S tier, as it's not just this buff that will give him high priority, but the fact Syndra will be played a ton due to her mini rework. Fizz has always loved the Syndra matchup and does very well into Echo as well, so both champs seeing more play this patch will be great for Fizz. Now that the Worlds patch has been released, Riot is able to buff Ryze up without worrying about making him too OP for pro play. Q-AP ratio is going from 50 to 55%. WAP ratio sees a boost as well, increased from 60 to 70%. In total, a 15% increase to Ryze's combo, which will have a considerable impact in the mid to late game. You do have to keep in mind that Ryze has been a very underwhelming C-tier mid for a while though, so these buffs will not result in him actually being a strong solo queue pick. We'll be leaving Ryze in C-tier as there will be so many better champs for the average player, but for the higher elos, we could definitely see him coming back into meta. The massive change for 12.18 is going to be the Syndra mini rework, so let's jump right into the changes. Syndra's passive will have a completely new look, as you will collect splinters to enhance Syndra and her abilities. The way you acquire splinters is by leveling up spells, dealing damage to an enemy with 2 separate abilities within 4 seconds, or killing a cannon minion. You will also restore 20, scaling to 215 mana when you collect a splinter. The cooldown per champion on this passive will be 8 seconds per target. Once you collect 120 splinters, Syndra will gain 15% total AP. Just based off this change alone, Syndra will scale much harder now. As for base stats, Syndra will have her base health lowered from 593 to 563. For Q changes, Riot has the cooldown being increased from 4 to 7 seconds. The mana cost is the same at rank 1 but lowered by 20 at max rank. Upon collecting 40 passive splinters, Syndra will be able to store 2 Q charges that will have a 1-second cooldown between casts. So once again, another set of changes that benefit Syndra much more in the mid game than early in lane. W changes include the sphere pickup detection radius going from 400 to 450. At 60 passive splinter stacks, Syndra's W will deal an additional 15% true damage. For the E changes, we have the magic damage being lowered from 85 scaling to 265 to 75 scaling to 235. E-AP ratio drops as well, going from 60 to 55%. The scatter angle on E is increased from 34 to 56 degrees. Cooldown is changed from 18 scaling to 14 seconds to a flat 15 at all ranks. E stun duration drops from 1.5 to 1.25 seconds. Upon stacking AD splinters, Syndra E will have its cone increased from 56 to 85 degrees and also slow the enemy by 70% for 1.25 seconds applied after the initial CC. Finally, we have the R changes, as it will now grant Q an additional 10 scaling to 30 ability haste. R damage per sphere is being lowered slightly at the later ranks. The big one here is once you stack 100 splinters, your R will execute champions below 15% max health. So basically, Syndra will now have a permanent Elder buff built into her R in the mid to late game. What we can conclude from these changes is that Riot has significantly weakened Syndra's lane bully power, but have given her much better scaling strength in return. For the Syndra players who love that aggressive early game aspect of the champ, you'll probably be disappointed by the direction here, but the new passive will be really interesting to play with. Since Syndra's scaling will be much stronger, we can actually see her having way more success in the lower elos now. It was always the case where Syndra would thrive more in higher ranks, but we don't think that will be the predicament anymore. With such a massive update like this, your guess is as good as ours in regards to where Syndra will land on the tier list, so don't take her rating too seriously right now. Once we get to test Syndra on live servers and see the stats roll in, we will have a much better idea of her power level, so be sure to check back on our mid-patch tier list update. For the mid lane tier list, we have Zed, Victor, and Vex as the most optimal solo queue carries. Like we just mentioned, don't look too much into Syndra's tier list placement right now, as we do think she will be stronger than before, but it's difficult to give her an accurate rating until we get to play her on live servers. Although jungle is his more popular role, watch out for Echo mid this patch as well. Echo has always been a phenomenal pick to play into Syndra, so when you factor in his buffs, combined with Syndra seeing a huge spike in play rate, Echo will be in a sneaky good spot. Just like Echo Jungle, mid lane Echo will be moving into our S tier for 12.19. The best low elo mids to spam are Swain, Malzahar, and Annie. Kassadin, Zed, and Vex are a few of the best mid lane bans. The lone ADC Changes patch is going to be a buff to Jinx. Base AD is up from 57 to 59. Our base damage to primary target is being increased by 50 at all ranks. Nothing major here, but the buffs will be just enough to move the needle and lead to Jinx going from B tier and into A for 12.19. For the ADC tier list, Kai'Sa and Miss Fortune are on a level above everyone else. MF especially is such an incredible ADC right now due to her recent crit buffs, along with being a very easy champion to pull off. Ashe is a pretty sleeper pick, as she was buffed last patch, and is also a great answer to the likes of a shorter ranged ADC like Kai'Sa. Kate being spammed a ton puts more priority on Ashe as well, as she can answer Kate's early game quite well. AP Twitch is one of the off-meta builds being buffed this patch, so keep an eye out for that. It's one of the off-meta builds that actually has viability to it, so in games where your team is really lacking magic damage, going for AP will be even better for Twitch now. Our top 3 low elo bot lane carries are Veigar, Miss Fortune, and Seraphine. MF, Kai'Sa, and Samira are a few of the most optimal bot lane bans. Just like ADC, only one change for support this patch, and it's going to be a buff to Sona. Q base damage is being increased by 10 at all ranks. E slow is going up from 40 to 50%. The Q buff is actually quite nice, as it's a spell that takes no skill to use, so adding guaranteed damage is big. It's not difficult at all to hit the enemy with multiple Qs throughout the lane, so a buff like this can really add up. Sona has been hanging out in our A tier for quite some time now, but a move into S is in order. When you take into account other enchanters like Yuumi and Lulu were recently nerfed quite heavily, Sona is going to be sitting in a really good spot. The support tier list will continue to feature Maokai, Janna, and Amumu as the most OP carries. Riot has gone super light on the support changes for this patch, so other than Sona moving up, the meta will remain very similar to 12.18. Blitz and Rakan are 2 supports who Riot have some off-meta buffs lined up for, so we will be keeping a close eye on them. It looks like the Rakan buffs are AP ratio changes though, so it's going to impact him more as a solo laner than it will support. The Blitz changes are looking really interesting, as his W attack speed is going up and AP ratios are increased on E and R. The mana cost on E and W are being increased though, so this may actually hurt Blitz support more than it will help him. We'll have to see where things land, so for now we will be leaving Blitz in the S tier. Best low elo supports of the patch are Mumu, Brand, and Zyra. Janna, Amumu, and Pyke are all really good support bans. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about SkillCapped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into Elo Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. So there's your quick update on the solo queue tier list as we head into a rather small 12.19 patch. Thank you guys so much for watching, good luck in solo queue, and we will see you back soon.